Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would give my final fight prediction and my final fight breakdown of the Naoya Inoue versus MJ Akhmadaliev fight that's going to be happening this weekend. And of course, for any of us that know about this boxing weekend, this is a very big boxing weekend. Of course, mainly because of that of the Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Bud Crawford super fight that will be happening, I believe, streaming on Netflix this up and coming Saturday. And of course, that's a huge fight because both of those guys have been looked at as two of the best guys, or debatably the two best fighters of their era. And whoever does win that fight very well could be debated as the clear best of their era, or at least there's going to be many that do debate that. But of course, there's a fighter by the name of Naoya Inoue who also is looked at as debatably the best of his era by many, of course, who's going to be fighting the day right afterwards. Which is very interesting because the last time that Inoue, overall was in a quote unquote super fight was also the last time that Terrence Bud Crawford was also in a quote unquote super fight. Now that being stated, MJ Akhmadaliev, this is somewhat of a super fight for Inoue. I don't think that MJ Akhmadaliev is necessarily a top 10 level pound for pound fighter or anything, but he is someone that is very, very talented. He's someone that, in my personal view, is about on the same level as a Marlon Tapales. And I know that certain people overall that they'll state Marlon Tapales, what are you talking about? He wasn't that talented, blah, blah, blah. Well, Marlon Tapales was actually able to get the victory over that of an MJ Akhmadaliev when he was a champion and undefeated, and he held two of the titles there. Now, of course, people have been alleging, for a while that Inoue has allegedly been avoiding that of an MJ Akhmadaliev. I can't really state that because how can you really avoid a man when you became completely undisputed in the weight class and that man ended up losing to that of the opponent that you ended up fighting next? So MJ Akhmadaliev, of course, was calling for an Inoue fight for a while, but he really had no one else to blame but himself because he had pretty much fucked that fight up. It just is what it is. But anyways, the point is that, in a way, one thing I will state is about, this fight is this. I do believe that Inoue holds MJ Akhmadaliev to a completely different respect than the majority of his opponents. I think he takes a look at him and knows that he's very talented. He's someone that is very powerful and someone also that, is a decent athlete. This is someone that he does have to take seriously. And if he does not, there is a possibility that he could lose. But that being stated, I do have a clear winner in this fight of just who I personally believe is going to win the fight. And I will release this video, more than likely first. And then I'm probably going to reveal that of my Canelo versus Crawford fight prediction, which I think is a little over an hour long. Of course, I did a live stream, but this, fight prediction, of course, which I ended up doing last week. So if I ended up talking or repeating a lot, it's because I kind of already made those points in the prior video. But anyways, the point being is that I will post that, and that's, probably is going to be a little bit afterwards, but that's going to be, kind of my solo thoughts, not talking with anybody else and not on live stream. I'll post that, probably tomorrow, same with this. But anyways, the point is that the Inoue versus MJ Akhmadaliev fight, this is a very interesting fight. And I would have to state that this is at least Inoue's third A-grade level name in his career, just in my view. I think that obviously Steve Von Folt was an A-grade level name. I do believe that Marlon Tapales was an A-grade level name. And I also believe that MJ Akhmadaliev is an A-grade level name. Now, certain people may debate, Nonito Donaire, but I do believe that Donaire, that he just wasn't quite the same fighter as what he once was. So if he was A minus, it was by the hairs of his chinny chin chin. But the point overall is that when we take a look at this fight, who do I believe is going to win the fight? I do believe that Mr. Naoya Inoue is going to win the fight. I think that just in my personal view that he has a little bit too much in terms of his arsenal. I think that he's too good of an athlete, and I think that he's someone that just has an all-around better skill set than that of an MJ Akhmadaliev. Now, similar to that of an Israel Madrimov, there are certain things that I see that are very similar in between them. I don't think that they're exactly the same fighter, but they do fight very, very similar. They work, a lot off of their feet, and they're very, quick feet at times, and they're very good use of angles, and they're good footwork, and yada, 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 and also making you overreach and setting you up for certain shots. That being stated, I do think a lot like Israel Madrimov that at times MJ Akhmadaliev can kind of be a little bit too reactionary. And what I mean by that is that when you face a fighter like this, they can be very awkward. But when you're facing an all-time great level talent or an all-time great level fighter, like that of a Naoya Inoue. In my personal view, a style like that, even if you're able to give them problems, it's more than likely not going to be enough in order to win the fight, just in my personal view. Now, of course, he did look impressive, I believe, in his most recent fights against that of, Luis Castillo or whatever that man's name was, and some of these other tomato cans. But, really, to be quite honest with you, the biggest fight of his career, he showed a lot of holes within his game. He was overall able to get hit with the jab. He was able to get hit with the right counter hook a lot of the times. He was able overall to have his high guard exposed to a certain degree when Marlon Tapales was able to back him up. And that's why I say that Marlon Tapales, in my personal view, he was someone, at least for that weight class, that was around an A- level fighter. Because he was someone that was not a joke of a fighter. If you take a look at him in that MJ fight, he was someone that used the uppercut through the guard very efficiently, a counter right hand. He changed levels and used a stabbing jab to the body quite efficiently. He was someone that, had a pretty damn good defense within that fight. He wasn't just some bitch within that fight. I think that a lot of people take a look at some of these Asian or Oriental fighters and just think that they're these basic fighters. And some of them definitely can be, within that of the lower weight classes. But you also have some that are either exceptional, like that of an Inoue or a Junto Nakatani, or you have some others that even if they don't appear to be as much, or they appeared overall to not as be on good of a trajectory early on, they may have switched around a little bit. Marlon Tapales, in my view, was very similar. So when you talk about it, overall, once again, that's why I say that Marlon Tapales and MJ, they're both very similar on that level, but there were certain things in my view that Tapales was able to take advantage of that Inoue, in my view, also more than likely will be able to take advantage of. But the main reason why I have Inoue winning this fight is because I do believe that there is a possibility that he will be the more active fighter of the two within this fight. I also believe that more than likely he's going to have more tricks up his sleeve. Inoue is someone that maybe if you can force him to fight a little bit more on the inside, even though he's still very capable to fight on the inside, he might have a little bit more problems there. Sometimes he kind of relies a little bit too much on the high guard, and he doesn't change levels with his head probably as much as what he should, or move his head off the center line. That being stated, MJ Akhmadaliev is someone that, although at times he can kind of provide the pressure, he's someone that is very, very reactionary. Now, once again, I do expect him to probably pressure Inoue a little bit, but I don't know if I expect him to start off in the fight like that. The way that I kind of expect this fight to go is Inoue to kind of take the lead, for them both to kind of feel each other out. Maybe they could share rounds in the early part of the fight, but I believe that Inoue will start off in the beginning of the fight having that stabbing jab to the body and then possibly backing him up. Sometimes MJ Akhmadaliev does have a habit of backing up in a straight line to a certain degree, or backing up with too many steps in a linear line. Inoue can possibly take advantage of that, and Tapales, that was a part of the reason why he was able to sneak certain shots around the guard when he had his high guard up. And he is someone that can throw certain counters on the back foot, but he's someone that kind of likes to take one step back and make you run into certain shots. But if you end up really putting him on the back foot and surprising him, you can get certain shots around his guard. And that's why I think that Inoue will be able to take advantage of that. Inoue is extraordinarily great, overall at really finding certain things to get around your guard or to get through your guard, and also at times at punching in between the shots. Inoue is someone that, overall is really, really good, at what he does. He's actually great at what he does. He's also an exceptional mid-range and long-range level fighter. He's not someone that is quite as exceptional, in my personal view, in the up-close and personal range. He is someone that at times can get a little bit too overzealous, and he doesn't change, the center line of his head as often as what he should. But that being stated, when Inoue is focused and when he truly believes that his level, or the level of competition in front of him, is truly a high-level threat, he's very, very focused. And I remember his fight against Steven Fulton, he basically, and that was a fight that I thought could have went either way. I thought that it was going to be, at the very least, highly competitive, going either way. Although I think I had even predicted Fulton to win that fight. But Inoue had completely proven me wrong. And not only was he able to beat that of a Steven Fulton, he had completely outboxed him, which was not something that I really thought was going to happen, because I thought that Inoue was a little bit too hittable comparative to some of the fights that I had seen. And also combined with the fact that Inoue was moving up in weight and he had never really fought that slick black American style before, but he went in that ring and he had completely outboxed that of a Stephon Fulton. It wasn't even close. And he did, it's not like he just beat Stephon Fulton overall because, once again, he was the greater athlete. That was a part of it, but he also was clearly just a more skilled fighter than that of a Stephon Fulton. There wasn't one aspect that Fulton showed that he was better in Inoue, and not feet, not head movement, not changing the levels, not the jab, not anything. And Fulton had some, kind of size advantages there. So, I mean, it just is what it is. That being stated, once again, I do expect a very sharp Inoue here. I expect him to start off with a double jab. I expect him to start off with that, of certain flashy combinations. Or, when I say flashy combinations, I really should say almost like guerrilla type of warfare. I expect him to get certain combinations in there and get back out. I do not believe that Inoue is going to stand in front of MJ Akhmadaliev in the first part of this fight. Maybe in the latter part of the fight if he hurts him consistently, or if he sees that MJ is not going to be a threat in the up close range after a while, because I do think that you can make him a bit uncomfortable if you put him within that range. But the point overall is that, in a way, I just don't see him doing that in the first part. And I think that he holds MJ in a massive respect. I think he knows that this guy, that he has the potential to at least make this a very tough fight. So I'm actually going to pick Naoya Inoue to win this fight by unanimous decision or that of a latter round stoppage. I'm not stating that he cannot win by stoppage, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up making this fight overall once again a little bit hard, because MJ is someone that punches very hard. He's someone that, is very accurate. Now, that being stated, once again, I do think that he's a little bit more reactionary than what he should be. And I've seen a lot of fighters lose certain fights, and I've made fight predictions overall and been correct on them just because certain fighters, they're a little bit too reactionary and a little bit too focused on their main game plan of countering. And that's great to a certain degree, and certain people will say, well, he's throwing less. Doesn't that mean that overall that Inoue has less opportunities to land? Well, that's with a certain fighter overall that may only have one game plan. But Inoue is someone that also can create his offense. He's also someone that can create his own opportunities. And in order for you to beat someone like that of a Naoya Inoue, in my personal view, you have to have an exceptional level of boxing IQ and all-around ability. And I think that MJ Akhmadaliev, that, he's an exceptional contender. I don't think that he's an exceptional pound-for-pound talent. And that's what it's going to take, in my personal view, to more than likely beat that of a Naoya Inoue. He is that special in my personal view. And although I think MJ will make it competitive at times, I think that he'll move in and outside of the angles. I do think after a while that the lack of activity, and I think after a while Inoue getting to him and creating his own offense, I do think that it will get to MJ Akhmadaliev. And I do think that Inoue more than likely is going to catch him with certain things, especially if MJ tries to push the fight forward at certain times, which I think at times he's going to be forced to. MJ Akhmadaliev, I've seen him in the Marlon Tapales fight, and at first he kind of tried the reactionary shit, but, he kind of figured out after a while that it wasn't working, so he had to pressure Tapales a little bit more. And sometimes he would run into shots, and sometimes he would be successful. But he is a little bit uncomfortable in that range. He can push the fight, but he really kind of prefers for you to overextend or for you to kind of run into his counters or run into certain shots. That's kind of what MJ kind of prefers. And I want to see how he reacts against the fighter that can create his own offense. And when you fight a fighter overall, once again, that can create his own offense within a multitude of ways, and also is great within the mid-range, extremely fast, and also extremely powerful, I really want to see how MJ Akhmadaliev handles that. And I do think eventually he will clearly be outworked. I think that he will be out-volumed more than likely, or that in a way more than likely, will be accurate enough in this fight. Now, Teddy Atlas, I believe, someone that, at times is a good breakdown artist, at other times, in my view, probably could be better. But Teddy Atlas, at certain times he said, he doesn't waste anything and that he's super accurate, this dude, MJ Akhmadaliev, and that's great. But once again, that also can lead to disaster. Because if you're, let's just even say that MJ Akhmadaliev is more accurate than that of an Inoue throughout this fight. Just because you're more accurate, or at times, the clear puncher at times, doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to win the fight. Take a look at the Bivol Artubetebi fight, for example, or the Canelo Lara fight. At times it will also depend on the pressure and the other shots that land, and if that person's game plan can be more effective against you. And I just don't know if I see a fight to where it's really going to be as similar to that. I think Inoue will hit MJ with flush shots, and I do think that he will hit him. I don't know if he's going to hit him quite as flush or as often as what he does other fighters, but I do think that Inoue more than likely is going to hit him quite consistently. Now, that being stated, Inoue, in my personal view, he's not always someone that throws as much volume as what some people would like to state, because I have seen in certain fights to where he does work a lot on accuracy. But he is someone, in my personal view, that can up the volume a little bit more when he needs to. Kind of same with MJ, but I think that MJ will be a little bit more uncomfortable within that range. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I think that Inoue, more than likely, I think that he's going to out-jab MJ. I think that there may be moments where MJ is more accurate, but I think that he is going to overall get outworked. I think that Inoue more than likely is going to be the busy fighter, and I think that that will cause an effect to where overall, once again, the judges see Inoue more than likely getting ahead. Because Inoue, in my view, probably overall will be landing after a while the more effective punches, or at least will be throwing enough and probably more than MJ, to the point to where he's landing more than enough effective punches, and MJ then starts to feel the pressure and starts to try to charge Inoue. I think that, he may land some effective shots, but I do also think that he will run into certain shots. Now, I think that MJ may have enough guile and may have enough skill maybe to keep Inoue, from completely stopping him, but if he ends up running into a shot, especially into one of Inoue's retreating hooks or one of his retreating shots, he more than likely is going to get stopped within that of the latter rounds. But I think more than likely that if Inoue hurts him really badly, I expect more than likely that MJ, that he's probably going to return back on his bicycle a little bit more and probably try to go after him. I could be wrong about that. He did overall once again charge Tapales, or he did go forward against Tapales a little bit more, but Tapales was also starting to lose a lot of steam. But in the early part of the fight, at least from what I had seen, when Tapales was very, very competitive, he had a very tough time consistently going forward, and he had a little bit of a struggle really kind of knowing what to do. But that being stated, he may have changed ever since that fight, so we'll see. But that's pretty much what I expect from this fight. I expect Inoue to win this fight, at least by that of a unanimous decision. I would not be surprised if there was a latter round stoppage, but he is going to have to run MJ into something, in my personal view, that is going to be a devastating punch. I have no doubt that Inoue at times will land some effective and very dangerous punches, but MJ is someone that's a little bit more elusive and someone overall that, can be a little bit quicker of foot, than probably his average opponents, and someone that also has legit A-grade level power. He has very devastating power. So I think that we're going to see a little bit more of a tentative Inoue in this fight, unless, of course, later on he just sees that MJ has no answers and he's on the retreat, and he needs to be very careful because MJ is someone that can hurt him. And if he's not, if he gets too wild and crazy in there, he could find himself getting knocked out. So he needs to be very, very careful. But that being stated, I expect Inoue, his jab, to more than likely be at least more active throughout the fight. And I expect that after a while that it will land more. Perhaps maybe not more accurately. Perhaps maybe yes. It could go either way. But that being stated, Inoue has a tremendous jab, and I think that Inoue is just going to be a little bit too active, a little bit too skilled, have a little bit too much variety in his style, and just be a little bit too much for that of an MJ Akhmadaliev, just in my personal view. But that being stated, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you guys overall for watching. I am picking Inoue to win this fight by that of unanimous decision or latter round stoppage, and we'll see what ends up happening within this fight. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll say that, Inoue, in my view, to bite the bullet, I'll say that he wins by latter round stoppage in my view, because I do think that after a while that he will have MJ just a little bit flustered, and I think that that will create more openings, because, MJ, in my view, will be a little bit more frantic either to throw or, at times he'll panic a little bit more, which may cost him to not throw quite as much, which can create openings for Inoue. But we'll see. That's what I expect, but I could be wrong. We'll see what happens. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I expect Inoue to win. I will say by latter round stoppage. I'll claim that, but wouldn't be surprised at all if this went to unanimous decision, because I do expect in a way that shows a little bit more respect to his opponent this time around than what he usually does. But anyways, that being stated, let's get in, let's see what happens. That is my fight prediction. I'll talk to you all later.